If you're flying near Chicago or Washington, D.C. this weekend and you spy an F-16 or a Black Hawk off your wing, you're in big trouble. The FAA has issued a NOTAM restricting flight in both areas for the NATO and G8 summits. The TFR around Camp David in Maryland will be significantly larger than what pilots are used to. With leaders of the world's most powerful nations communing in the woods, security is extremely high. And pilots everywhere need to know that presidential TFRs are going to be popping up more and more frequently.
The TFRs, due to the presidential movements through the campaign season, will continue to spring up all over the country, all the way up and through November, these large 10 nautical mile, 30 nautical mile TFRs. Best way to find out about them is to check NOTAMs, Notices to Airmen. Several ways you can do that: through flight service, through DUOT or DUOTs are the official methods, also the FAA website, faa.gov, and of course the AOPA products, our flight planner, they're posted on there. There are also email blasts that AOPA will send out as these TFRs approach.
Now, it's no secret that many pilots have wondered why these TFRs have to be so big and complex. Well, there may be some relief in the future.
Well, over the last 2 weeks, I've been meeting with NORAD in Colorado Springs, Colorado, their headquarters, as well as Tyndall Air Force Base the week before, sitting down and having discussions on how to mitigate these TFRs, make them more accessible, and reduce the TOIs or tracks of interest. Those talks have gone well, almost unprecedented, as we had the Secret Service, NORAD, FAA, TSA, and industry partners all in one room coming up with outreach ideas and questioning the size and shape of the TFRs to make them more accessible to general aviation.
The military very much wants to reduce the number of targets they have to track and intercept. We all know how difficult it can be sometimes to see other aircraft even after the controller has pointed them out for you. Today in Hampton, Virginia, NASA engineers are working on some advanced technologies that might turn you into a bionic pilot. AOPA Live reporter Jim Moore has that story.
NASA is taking synthetic vision beyond the panel, building a tool for pilots to see what cannot be seen and pair up on parallel approaches.
Maintain spacing interval 109 seconds, no closer than 4 miles. Precision runway monitoring radar in use. Report equivalent visual contact of parallel traffic on 28 left at Darney. Cleared for the 28 right simultaneous offset instrument approach.
We're looking at next-gen concepts.
Engineer Trey Arthur said the research team combined existing technology to create a head-worn display capable of producing synthetic vision. The image on the large green screen is a duplicate of what's projected on a plain old pair of glasses.
And this would be, at Chicago, you're paired with someone, left and right. And then the IM part of it is interval management. And that would be the ATC tells you to pair with an airplane, stay so many seconds behind them, and just kind of follow them in.
At NASA's Langley Research Center in Hampton, Virginia, synthetic vision has evolved from a panel display to a 10-pound helmet prototype, then a skateboard helmet fitted with a display, and now to show terrain and traffic in detail on a screen the size of a postage stamp.
In certain situations, they can see through the fog, they can see through the weather, especially if there's a thermal signature that you can pick up. And so you don't have to have that onboard database. And it also solves what we call the deer on the runway problem. If there's something out there that's not in your database, that's not transponding, that EVS system could potentially pick that up. So the idea here is if the pilot's wearing a head tracker and you connect that to a camera, and the controller would say, look at 10 o'clock, you would naturally just look over at the 10 o'clock position and find the target you're looking for. And then come back to monitor like you normally would.
In any way.
That's the idea. That's the eventual hope, is that what we call better than visual.
Once the electronics are sped up to allow the virtual image to match the real world in real time, eliminating the current 20-millisecond lag that can cause disorientation, flight testing will begin. The cameras can also be used during clear weather, giving pilots of cutting-edge aircraft designs that limit forward visibility a clear view.
We got 3 cameras here, and those would be mixed with symbology through a computer, and then that would be displayed to the pilot. Yeah, we're scheduled to flight test that summer, fall time frame, if everything happens the way it should.
Arthur said the enhanced vision systems are being designed with commercial aviators in mind, but it will be up to the market to decide whether GA gets it first, as happened when synthetic vision was adopted earliest by bizjet operators. In just a few years, we may all be flying tightly spaced parallel approaches. In Hampton, Virginia, I'm Jim Moore, AOPA Live.
Once the system passes the test in simulators and real aircraft, NASA will decide whether to apply for a patent or simply give the technology to private industry. Some airplanes are just a whole lot of fun to fly. We caught up with New York Times best-selling author Stephen Kuntz, who lets it all hang out in the breeze in a bright red Breezy.
Well, I saw a picture on a calendar of the guy flying one, and I just thought, you know, that looks like so much fun. It's had engine overhaul, new prop, took it down to bare frame, had to replace 6 ribs in each wing, had to recover it, built this nose thing, and actually put instruments, radio, transponder in it, and anyway, it's now the world's most expensive Breezy. Well, the drag count is so high, you got to be real careful about getting yourself in a position where you have to climb, because you're just not going to climb very fast. You also, on landing, you want to keep the power on until literally the wheels touch, because if you take it off and try to glide it, then when you add power, you're already behind the power curve. As an airplane, it's a pretty poor airplane, but as a toy, it's a lot of fun. We get up, you know, I try to get people to hold their arms and hands out, and first-time riders are often have a death grip on the seat and won't let go. And you know, you finally get them to hold their hands out and they can feel the power of the air. It's, you know, by just doing the thing you did as a kid, sticking your hand out of the car. And there's a freak out factor for first-time pilots because, you know, there's just nothing there. You're just sitting in a chair going through the sky. Just go up and fly around a little bit, sort of like a motorcycle with wings.
A fun airplane, but a little scary for pilots to fly, I can tell you that. Meanwhile, the ramp here at Frederick played host to a very special warbird this week. A C-47 that played a critical role in D-Day was staged here for several days before the upcoming Andrews Air Force Base Air Show. AOPA Live's Paul Harrop got a chance to see the gallant Goonie up close. He has that story.
This particular C-47 was manufactured by the Douglas Aircraft Company. It left factory in Long Beach in September of 1943. And then in 1944, it went to participated in the North Africa campaign.
But that's where this Goonie bird's story really begins. Out of Africa, this airplane headed to Europe to help make history. June 6, 1944, D-Day. This bird was the lead plane for the 37th Troop Carrier Squadron.
1,271 airplanes, 23,000 paratroopers were dropped over Normandy. This particular aircraft, its jumpers were landed very, very near St. Mary Glace. The purpose of the mission was to put paratroopers behind enemy lines so that they could cut off, they took out bridges and so forth, so they could cut off the enemy from coming onto the beach.
The brave men jumped in total darkness, but the danger didn't stop there.
If the invasion on the beach had failed, they would have been totally cut off because their support was coming from the beach.
The pilots had it just as bad. They dropped to 100 feet and hightailed it back to England under cover of darkness. None of the more than 1,000 C-47s were lost that day, but this one still lives on as a flying testament to the bravery of the greatest generation.
The airplane's, 70 years old, and it's really kind of an honor for us to show this.
Paul Harrop, AOPA Live.
Flying clubs are something special. They give pilots a chance to get to know one another and provide more affordable access to the skies. While there are many clubs around the world, few have stood the test of time like the Elkins Pilots Club in Randolph County, West Virginia. AOPA President Craig Fuller and I joined them last weekend to mark 50 years of the club. The Elkins Pilots Club started in 1962 with one Piper J3 Cub, one instructor, and get this, more than 100 students in the first 12 months. Craig underscored the importance of clubs like Elkins.
Pilot clubs, aero clubs, flying clubs that are just absolutely essential if we're going to give people access to aircraft, give them the chance to learn how to fly aircraft and use aircraft.
And some fun facts: when the club started, avgas was 25 cents a gallon. Airplanes rented for $4 an hour. Two of the club's original members and the flight instructor unveiled a stone monument commemorating the founding of the club. And a sad note this week, Mama Bird has flown home. That's Evelyn Johnson, the legendary Tennessee flight instructor and designated pilot examiner. She died last Thursday at the age of 102. Her thousands of students called her Mama Bird because of the way she watched out for them. AOPA pilot technical editor Mike Collins interviewed Evelyn Johnson several times over the years. Here are some of his recollections.
Johnson took her first flight in October of 1944, and she earned her private pilot certificate the following June. She went on to become a flight instructor and was named a designated pilot examiner in 1952. She also became one of the first female helicopter pilots. Along the way, Johnson logged 57,635.4 flight hours, and she administered some 9,000 practical tests. She built her flight time giving instruction and conducting check rides. And at the time of her death, she was the highest time female pilot and the highest time living pilot in Guinness World Records. Unfortunately, glaucoma and a 2006 automobile accident that cost Johnson part of one of her legs pretty much ended her flying, but they did not end her involvement in aviation. She was manager of Moore Murrell Field in Morristown, Tennessee from 1953 until shortly before her death, and she served on the Tennessee Aeronautics Commission for nearly 2 decades. I first interviewed Evelyn in the early 1990s, shortly after her logbook had turned over 50,000 hours. I interviewed her sitting in the lobby of the old Morristown Airport Terminal building. It was a big room filled with sofas, and she and I were the only 2 people in there except for 2 corporate pilots sitting by the window, wearing their sunglasses, waiting for their King Air passengers to come back for a meeting. We were talking, and Evelyn was telling me about her experiences island hopping through the Caribbean, ferrying Piper Tri-Pacers to South America using only a wet compass for navigation, when I noticed that these pilots had taken off their sunglasses and they were kind of leaning over to hear what we were talking about. A few minutes later, I looked and they had moved closer to us so they could hear better. And before I knew it, they were sitting immediately behind us on a sofa, just hanging on her every word. They were spellbound that this little grandmotherly figure could have done that so many years ago. We had a delightful first interview until she looked at the clock and excused herself and apologized. She said, "I'd like to talk longer, but I've got a student waiting," and off she went to a waiting Cessna with her ever-present armful of cushions. I was always impressed by the quality of her memory. After that first interview, I returned several years later to interview her for AOPA pilot, and I said, yeah, we sat here 4 years ago, and she said, no, it was 5 years ago, and she knew better than I had when we had last talked. Tom?
Thanks, Mike. She had an amazing impact on thousands of pilots, and we need more flight instructors like her. And in just a moment, flying right side up, down under, and a premium crew aviation museum.